I'm going to call the court to order. We're here in the Northern District of California for United States versus Kara Bassett. And I'm going to ask, and my name is Judge Schreier, I'm going to ask the parties to enter appearances.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Anna Claypoole, and I, along with my co-counsel, Ms. Isabella Torres, will be representing the prosecution in today's case.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Ms. Claypoole.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Emily Aikens, and I will be representing Kara Bassett in today's case. I'm joined along with my co-counsel, Jake Ruderman.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Your Honor, there's no sound.
Okay, my apologies. Okay, we'll get it right this time. So the only people that should have their cameras on and their mics on are the two attorneys and myself, although I will turn my mic off as needed. We will be on speaker view during speeches. We'll be on gallery view during examinations. And everyone should have their mics muted to avoid background noises. Let's do preliminaries now. We'll go with Ms. Claypoole first.
Yes, Your Honor, good morning. First, we would like to ask, due to the technical nature of this trial, that if at any time you cannot hear or see my witness or I, to please just interrupt us and so that we can fix the issue.
Yeah, and I'd ask you to do the same with me because obviously I forget to turn my mic on, so deal.
So that's very good. In addition, we would like to invoke Rule 615, the rule of constructive sequestration.
Ms. Aikens, what do you say about that?
Yes, Your Honor, no objections. However, we would like to note that Kara Bassett will be constructively in court today, and she is our party representative.
Fair enough.
All right, and finally, Your Honor, we would like to ask for your preference in regards to striking testimony and if we should request it after each sustained objection or assume testimony to be stricken.
Let's move to strike. Okay,
All right,
so I'll ask that you move to strike.
Yes, Your Honor, sounds good. With that, the prosecution is ready to proceed.
Very well, Ms. Aikens.
Yes, Your Honor, before we proceed, we would just like to draw the court's attention to pretrial order number 7. It stipulated that all exhibits 4 through 33 are pre-admitted and may be used at any time throughout the course of today's trial.
So noted.
And with that, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
Very well. Okay, so we need to switch to speaker view and the government may open.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Don Clark was but a pawn in Queen Kara's game of chess. May it please the court. Now, members of the jury, I want you to visualize Don Clark, an intelligent, caring man who fell hard for Kara Bassett. They hit it off, and in January of 2011, pledged to have and to hold for better or for worse till death do them part. Unfortunately, Don Clark broke this vow. He neither cared for Kara's wants and needs nor protected the things she cherished most, their elephants. This caused a monster to grow inside of the defendant, enraging her until one day she snapped. The marriage turned into a game of chess, and the defendant played smart to get what she wanted. She hired producer Joe Young to create a documentary starring Kara under the moniker Elephant Queen, a name that so perfectly described her cunning nature and brought her into the limelight. As more and more people tuned into this show, the monster only grew, and Miss Bassett desired more. So she, like any good chess player would, thought 10 steps ahead, and when offered a gambit, she took it. sacrificing Don Clark to achieve the elephant sanctuary. We will prove this to you through the testimony of investigator Steph Branham. He will provide evidence to debunk the defendant's facade of a loving wife and walk us through each and every aspect of Ms. Bassett's so perfectly thought out plan. He will show that how Kara Bassett, and only Miss Kara Bassett, was the person with the opportunity to take Dawn's life on that fateful August night. But through the defense's testimony of Joe Young, you might hear a different story. They might try to claim that Don Clark might have been killed by someone else, or that he isn't even dead. But members of the jury, we, the prosecution, will shine a light on the monster that is the defendant and show how on that fateful August night, she used what brought peace to elephants to bring pain to her spouse, carfentanil. Now, we, the people, hold the burden of proof in today's case, meaning we must show to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Bassett murdered her husband and did so with malice. But we will meet that burden today. Through the testimony of Steph Branham and evidence he will provide, we will show that on the night of August 18, 2017, Ms. Bassett played judge, jury, and executioner on her husband, depriving him of justice and murdering him in cold blood. So, members of the jury, the prosecution has but one request for you today. Give Don Clark the justice he was so woefully deprived of. We urge you today to rule in favor of the people and convict Miss Bassett of murder. Because remember, Don Clark was but a pawn in Queen Kara's game of chess. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Claypoole. Ms. Aikens.
Yes, Your Honor. Wild assumptions led to wild accusations. May it please the court, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. It's July 2017. Don Clark is on his way to work. He's thinking about a business deal with the Costa Rican mafia that has gone poorly. He's thinking about his ex-wife, Lisa Clark, who almost has the evidence she needs to prove that he hid assets during their divorce. He's thinking about the fights he's been having with his current wife. He's thinking about escaping it all. Flash forward to August 18th, and that thought became a reality. Don gets a text from a Costa Rican number. Call me immediately. After speaking with that number for almost an hour, Don knows that he can't fix what he's done. His only option is to run away. After sending a text to his wife that he's going out for a while, Don shuts off his phone signal, throws that phone in the big gum swamp. Then he takes off in his plane, and he never turns back. And we're here today because the government has accused Kara Bassett of intentionally killing her husband, Don Clark. It's turning Claypoole's burden to prove this to you beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest burden in our judicial system. That means that if you have any hesitancy about whether the government has proved their case, you must find Kara Bassett not guilty. We, the defense, bear no burden, but we will show you that the government made 3 wild assumptions that are fatal to their case. They assumed Don Clark is dead. They assumed the evidence implicates Kara Bassett. And they assumed that suspects other than Kara didn't need to be considered. First, we'll hear that the government assumed Don Clark is dead, although the FBI hasn't been able to find his body in the 3 years since his disappearance. Why? Because the evidence will show that he ran away. You'll hear that he expressed the desire to flee, and that he had the means to do so because of several sources of hidden assets. Second, the government assumed the evidence implicates Kara Bassett. Attorney Claypoole just told you about a syringe of carfentanil that went missing. Members of the jury, where is that syringe? Why couldn't the government find it? You'll hear that we can't connect it to the murder at all. Now, the government will also try to tell you today that algae on Carabasset's boots was a match to the Big Gum Swamp. But Agent Branham will be forced to admit to you that we can't tell when or how that algae was deposited. And third, the government assumed that suspects other than Kara didn't need to be considered. Even if the government's assumption about Don being dead is correct, you'll learn that it's very possible his ex-wife, Lisa Clark, killed him. You'll learn that although Miss Clark has no alibi, although she threatened Don in the past, although she refused to cooperate with the investigation, and although she told the FBI that her ex-husband deserved to die, she was never investigated. Members of the jury, wild assumptions led to wild accusations. That's why at the conclusion of today's trial, I'll come before, and I'll ask you to find Kara Bassett not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aikens. Everyone please switch to gallery view. And the government may call its first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the prosecution calls Investigator Steph Branham to the stand.
Investigator Branham, consider
Yes.
yourself sworn.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Please state your name for the court.
My name is Special Agent Steph Branham.
And what's your current occupation, Mr. Branham?
I work for the FBI.
Can you tell me about your experience as an investigator?
Well, after I obtained a degree in psychology back in 1982, I went to work at Quantico, Virginia, where I was trained with the FBI in a 20-week training course.
All right, and what skills did you obtain from this training course?
Well, through that training course, I was skilled in evidence collection, interrogations, interviews, crime scene investigation.
At this time, the prosecution moves to tender Investigator Steph Branham as an expert in the field of criminal investigations, Your Honor.
Ms. Aikens?
There are no objections, Your Honor.
So Agent Branham is recognized as an expert in criminal investigations. You may proceed.
So how are you involved in today's case?
Well, in today's case, I was the officer I was designated into looking through the disappearance of Don Clark, as well as the arresting officer of Kara Bassett.
And do you know if Ms. Bassett had access to her husband's finances?
I learned that through Don Clark's attorney.
And would you recognize this attorney letter if I showed it to you in court today?
I would.
Ms. Torres, could you put Exhibit 4 on the screen? All right, so can you tell me about the couple's finances based on this letter?
Based on the letter, it started off as the couple not signing a prenup early on in their relationship. And then around May 1st of 2017, Don Clark signed off on a power of attorney. That power of attorney would give his assets over to the defendant in case he died or disappeared.
Disappeared. Have you ever seen a clause like this before?
Personally, no. But when I interviewed some witnesses, they hadn't either.
And now I want to draw your attention to the second section on this paragraph. Can you describe what this paragraph describes?
The second paragraph relates that Don Clark had filed for a restraining order. However, that restraining order did not go through due to a technical error.
And does Don describe why he didn't refile the restraining order?
Well, it states that Don Clark didn't refile the restraining order because he thought things were improving at home.
Investigator Branham, would you recognize a copy of this restraining order if I were to show it to you in court today?
I would.
All right, can you reference this exhibit within your trial binder? Exhibit number 34.
All right.
Investigator, what is this document?
Exhibit 34 is the restraining order.
And is it a fair and accurate copy?
It does appear to be.
Has it been altered or changed in any way since you last saw it?
No, it hasn't.
At this time, the prosecution moves to enter Exhibit 34 into evidence, Your Honor.
Ms. Aikens?
Yes, Your Honor. We would object to this document under the basis of 801 hearsay and also under Rule 404A, improper character evidence.
Okay, so hearsay and improper character. Response, Ms. Claypoole.
Yes, Your Honor. This is an exception to hearsay, seeing as the declarant is unavailable and it is a record of regularly conducted business activity.
Your Honor, if I may?
Yeah, we'll deal with the hearsay first. Okay, Ms. Aikens, go ahead.
Just because the declarant is unavailable, it doesn't mean that this document is not hearsay, Your Honor. Additionally, the foundation under regularly conducted business activity under 8036 has not been laid, and there's no evidence that this document actually is regularly conducted business activity. This is a document that was filed with the court. It has nothing to do with Don Clark's business, Your Honor.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yeah, I want to ask you, what does the declarant being unavailable have to do with the exception that you offer?
That was a mishap on my part. What I meant to say is that the declarant is unavailable, and in addition to that, we have the bonus exception of 804B6, which is a statement offered against a party that wrongfully caused the declarant's unavailability. I can elaborate if need be, Your Honor.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're sticking with the declarant unavailable and you're saying it's now admissible as an exception because the unavailability is on the defendant. Is that correct? Ms. Aikens, please respond to that.
Yes, Your Honor. What we are doing here today is trying to determine whether Kara Bassett is the one who caused Don Clark's unavailability. Now, it's the defense's contention that she absolutely did not, and that Don Clark simply ran away or was murdered by someone other than Kara Bassett. Now, this exception does not apply when it's just assumed that Kara Bassett might have caused this unavailability, and thus this exception does not apply, Your Honor.
Response?
Please.
Yes, Your Honor, within the restraining order, we learned that Ms. Bassett did threaten Don's life, which is essential to the charge at hand today, and therefore goes to prove how the declarant's prior statement tends to cause the unavailability of the declarant, seeing as Don Clark is dead, Your Honor.
I guess the question is, what is the burden that you bear to establish that the declarant's unavailability is the responsibility of the defendant? It's certainly not the same as for a conviction. What is the standard that I must apply?
Just a moment, Your Honor.
Ms. Aikens, do you know what it is?
Your Honor, in today's case, because we can't know directly that Kara Bassett was involved in this disappearance, this evidence cannot come in under that exception, Your Honor. The standard is that we absolutely have to know that one party caused another party to be unavailable, and that is not what's happening in today's case.
Well, I disagree with that, because if that were true, then defendants would be wise to kill witnesses against them, and that can't be correct. The standard of admissibility is not beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you know what it is, Ms. Claypoole?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Bassett, there was enough evidence to bring her on trial today, and seeing as we have that evidence and this restraining order directly correlates to that evidence, we hold less of a standard to meet, but we do know that she did wrongfully cause the defendant's the declarant's unavailability due to the fact that there is significant evidence against Ms. Bassett enough to file a charge.
Okay, here's the court's ruling on this piece of evidence on hearsay grounds. We still have the character issue to deal with. Under Rule 104, when relevance or any admissibility depends on a fact, the standard is evidence sufficient to support a finding. Now, my question is there evidence sufficient to support a finding that the defendant is indeed responsible for the declarant's unavailability? What do you think about that, Ms. Claypoole? What evidence do you have in that is sufficient to support a finding?
the evidence that, I'm sorry, could you repeat yourself, Your Honor?
What evidence have you offered thus far that's sufficient to support a finding that the defendant is responsible for the declarant's unavailability?
Yes, Your Honor, seeing as Ms. Bassett did have a lot to gain from her husband's death due to the disappearance clause that enabled her to gain over $6 million in assets, we understand that she has motive and therefore we meet that burden.
I don't think it's enough. It's sustained on hearsay grounds.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah.
All right. So, Investigator Branham, I want to talk about Don's location on the night he was last seen. Do you know when he last contacted Kara?
Well, based on my investigation, the last time that he contacted Kara Bassett was on the night that he disappeared, August 18th at around 9 p.m.
And did he reach out to her anytime after that?
No, ma'am, she did not.
What about Mr. Clark? Did he ever text or call Kara?
No, he texted Miss Bassett right before he left the home, but no further after that.
Right, would you recognize these text message records if I were to show them to you in court today?
I would.
Ms. Torres, can you throw exhibit 31 or 21 on the screen? All right, so can you read entry 9 for the court?
Entry 9 states that at around 11:14 p.m., a text message was sent saying, going out for a while. It went from Don Clark to Kara Bassett.
Was anything else sent after this time?
After that point, no.
And do you know where Don went after this was sent?
After this was sent, we investigated some GPS records that suggest that Don Clark was then going to Big Gum Swamp from the Elephant Park.
All right, and now I also want to talk about entries 3 through 5 on these cell phone records. Can you summarize these for the court?
Entries 3 through 5 suggest that after Don Clark had left, they had not reached out or contacted beyond that point.
And was this a change from Kara's normal habit?
It did seem to be a change, yes.
All right, now going back to these GPS records, would you recognize these if I were to show them to you?
I would.
All right, Ms. Torres, can you put those on the screen? All right, so where did the van go that night?
Well, from the Elephant Park, the van then went to Big Gum Swamp, which is 139 miles east of the Elephant Park.
And did you guys ever find the van during your investigation?
We did.
And did you collect any evidence from the van?
We found some hair strands as well as fingerprints belonging to Don Clark. We also found fingerprints of Kara Bassett and another park employee.
And would you recognize a copy of Exhibit 5 if I were to show it to you in court today?
Potentially, yes.
And Ms. Torres, can you put that on the screen? So could you explain what specific matches you found regarding Mr. Clark's hair?
The hair indicated that there were about 6 strands in the back of Don Clark's van.
And what about the fingerprints? What matches did you find for those?
The fingerprints show that they matched Don Clark, Kara Bassett, and another park employee.
All right, and now finally, what did you find the algae collected from this van?
We found some mud samples on the driver's side of Don Clark's van. They matched samples that we had also obtained from Big Gum Swamp.
And can you explain what specific matches you found?
We had found a rare strand of algae. Not only was it found on the driver's side of Don Clark's van, but also on the underside of the boots owned by Kara Bassett and the underside of a wheelchair that was found at the park.
All right, and Investigator Branham, can you clarify as to where you found the van staged again?
The van was staged at the Belle Leon Airport.
And how far is the airport from the park?
It's about 5 miles.
So, Investigator Branham, what do you hypothesize based on all the evidence you collected?
Based on the evidence I had collected, it seemed clear that after Kara Bassett murdered her husband, she loaded his body into that van and drove it to the swamp. Then she left it off at the airport to make it seem as if he had left or skipped town.
So how did the defendant get home that night if she staged her van at the airport?
It was only about 5 miles away, ma'am. She could have walked. She could have found another way to get home. It wasn't that far, about 10 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Ms. Aikens, you may cross-examine.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Agent.
Good afternoon.
Now, I want to make something clear from the start. You said that Don Clark was murdered, but to be clear, you haven't been able to find his body in the 3 years since he went missing, correct?
No, ma'am, we believe it was lost to the swamp.
And in addition to not having a body, you also can't find a murder weapon, right?
We never recovered the syringe we believe to be the murder weapon.
That's a yes or no question, Agent?
That is a yes.
Now, I'd like to talk to you about the possibility that Don Clark fled somewhere to escape his troubles in Costa Rica and to escape his troubles at home. Now, you're aware that Don was doing business with the Costa Rican mafia, correct?
We did become aware of some shadier business deals.
And we can agree that you're aware that Don Clark got a text, which I'm projecting right now as Exhibit 21, on the night of his disappearance from a Costa Rican number, right?
That is what it says, yes.
That text translates to call me immediately.
I don't speak Spanish.
Agent, in your report, you indicate that this text translates to call me immediately, correct?
Based on other investigators interpreting it for me, yes.
And we can agree that Don then spoke with this person for 52 minutes, correct?
That is what it says.
And then the next activity from his cell phone after that was a text to his wife that he was going out for a while, right?
That is correct.
Just a few moments later, his phone signal turned off, correct?
It did.
Now, Agent, we can agree that if he wanted to, Don Clark had the financial means to run away, right?
I was informed through Don Clark's attorney that he did have some cash off the books as well as some other assets, yes.
Right, so he had off the books cash, correct?
That's what I said, yes.
And he was also hiding $2 million worth of assets from Lisa Clark, right?
And that's what I was told by Don Clark's attorney.
Okay, I think I heard objection, personal knowledge. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. There's a lack of personal knowledge here.
Okay, Ms. Aikens.
Yes, Your Honor. In the letter that Attorney Claypoole projected on direct examination, it does detail that lawsuit. And additionally, in one of the exhibits which Agent Branham reviewed, Exhibit 33, it states in Don Clark's obituary that Lisa Clark was suing Don for $2 million. Agent Branham has reviewed these materials and he is familiar with this fact.
May I respond?
What do you say to that, Ms. Claypoole?
Yes, the claim from Lisa Clark was unsubstantiated and is not recognized as a fact, seeing as she was only believing that Don Clark had hidden $2 million from her. It's not a stated fact, and Agent Branham would not know whether or not it was true or even existed.
Your Honor, if I may?
Let me see if I understand the argument that the agent did hear this individual say that, but your objection is that he didn't know whether it was true or not. Is that right?
So the agent saw through Tuminelli's letter that Lisa Clark claimed that Don hid $2 million from her, but we don't know whether or not that's true. It's just Ms. Clark's unsubstantiated claim, and Branham is only aware of that.
What do you say to that, Ms. Aikens?
Yes, Your Honor. That he isn't sure if that claim is actually substantiated. He may testify to the fact that Lisa was suing Don for $2 million, and that claim has been made against Don Clark, so that it's reasonable to believe that he was hiding those $2 million in assets.
I think it meets the threshold. Overruled.
Agent, I'll ask you again. You knew that Don Clark was accused of hiding $2 million of assets from Lisa Clark, correct?
I had heard that from his attorney, correct.
And he also had a twin-engine Cessna and a license to fly it, correct?
I did find Mr. Clark's airplane at the hangar at the airport. It hadn't left.
And we can agree that Caravassett told you in this interview it was a two-engine plane, right?
It was.
Now, Agent, we can agree that a large part of your conclusion that Don had not fled somewhere else was based on the fact that this plane was right there in the hangar, correct?
That is part of my investigation, correct.
But to be clear for the jury, if you look at that exhibit, the plane only has one engine, correct?
From this picture, it seems that way.
And I'm showing you a picture of a two-engine plane right now. And we can agree that you have no idea where Don's two-engine plane is?
Ma'am, I've never worked with planes. I couldn't talk about whether or not there's a difference or whether or not there may be another engine on the Cessna. I'm not familiar with aviation.
But we can agree from the previous exhibit I showed you, you can only see one plane, one engine on that plane, correct?
From that angle, correct.
Now I'd like to talk to you about the assumptions made regarding the algae evidence. We can agree that Big Gum Swamp is a popular hunting and hiking site, correct?
It is. It has 13,000 acres of alligator-infested waters.
And so if an employee or visitor of the elephant park had been to the Big Gum Swamp before, they could have tracked that algae onto the elephant park, correct?
Potentially.
And if that happened, Kara Bassett could have that algae on her boots from simply walking around her own park, right?
I suppose so. If Kara Bassett were to step in the mud tracked in by another employee somewhere on the park.
Now I'm showing you what's been pre-admitted as Exhibit 5. We can agree that this document says you can't be sure when or how that algae was deposited on Kara Bassett's possessions, correct?
That is correct.
And we can agree that despite the possibility of the fact that algae from Big Gum Swamp might have been tracked to the elephant park, you still didn't test the algae at the elephant park to see if that was the case, correct?
No, ma'am, we did not.
Now I'd like to talk to you about Lisa Clark. You knew that Lisa Clark was suing Don at the time of the alleged murder, correct?
I found that out. Correct.
And you knew that Lisa Clark contacted Don on the date of the disappearance, right?
Yes, she did.
But you don't know what that call was about, do you?
We can only see that there was a call, not what the contents of that call was.
Well, you also don't know what that call was about because Lisa Clark refused to cooperate in your investigation, right?
That's correct. I attempted to interview her and she declined.
Her only statement to you was that she hoped Don Clark was dead. Right?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Response? Can't hear you, Miss Aikens.
Can you hear me now?
No, I didn't hear anything you said. You need to move closer to your microphone because I'm not hearing your response to the hearsay objection.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, my apologies for that. Pursuant to Rule 8033, this statement goes to Lisa Clark's state of mind. She hoped Don Clark is dead. That's a direct hope that she expressed. And under Rule 8033, that is admissible.
Ms. Claypoole.
Yes, Your Honor. 8033 is a then existing mental, emotional, or physical condition. However, this was a fact that Ms. Lisa Clark believed to be true, not a desire or anything such as that, but more of something, a claim that she wished was also to be verified.
Your Honor, may I respond?
You may.
8033 states that if the declarant has a then existing mental condition or a hope or a desire, that is included within the exception, Your Honor. Now, Lisa Clark said that she hoped Don Clark was dead. That is representative of her state of mind. And as such, this statement is an exception to hearsay under Rule 8033.
I agree. Objection is overruled.
Agent, can you hear me from back here?
I can, yes.
So we can agree that Lisa Clark said that she hoped Don Clark was dead, correct?
I heard her say that. True.
She said that she wanted him to be sorry.
I believe so, yes.
And we can agree that you have no idea where Lisa Clark was on the night of the alleged murder, correct?
I do not. She declined an interview.
Thank you, Agent. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Ms. Claypoole, redirect.
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. So, Investigator Brenna, I'd like to talk about what you uncovered with your investigation in regards to Miss Aikens' cross. So I understand that she just stated that you didn't test the algae at the park, but could you explain to the court why you didn't test the algae at the park?
We already had a substantial amount of evidence outside of the algae that would potentially be present at the park. We had gathered samples from both Care Bassett's boots, from the side of Don Clark's van, from the underside of a wheelchair, and we compared that to the samples taken at Big Gum Swamp, where it was concluded that they were very highly likely a match.
And regarding
Did I
this,
hear you object, Ms. Aikens?
Yes, Your Honor. I objected to improper opinion, if I may elaborate.
You may.
This witness was entered as an expert in criminal investigation. And this witness then went on to talk about the algae evidence and why there weren't further tests conducted. However, all of those conclusions are in the forensic report. That report doesn't specifically address why those other tests weren't conducted. And this agent is not an expert in the field of chemistry or algae samples or anything within that particular area, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I respond?
You may.
Pursuant to Rule 703, Investigator Branham is allowed to rely on other experts' opinions that assisted him in drawing his own conclusions from the investigation. This is the case with the forensics report. Mr. Branham relied on Mrs. Greaves' report of the algae at the park to draw his own conclusions of Ms. Bassett.
May I respond?
Final word, Ms. Aikens. Yes.
Well, that report does detail the findings of the investigation. It doesn't specifically state why they didn't test the algae at the elephant park. Because of that, Agent Branham can't make that conclusion why they didn't test that algae, as he is not qualified in that area.
Can you point me, Ms. Claypoole, to where in the report there's a basis for the agent's testimony?
In regards to why he didn't test the second, test the part?
Yeah, that's what we're fighting over right now, right?
Yes, Your Honor. Would you like us to pull it up on screen share?
Yeah, because otherwise I'm going to sustain the objection. If he's just giving his opinion, he hasn't been qualified as an expert in that area. If it's in the report, that's a different story.
Yes, Your Honor. Just a moment. My second chair is pulling it up right now.
And just to be clear, we're looking for information regarding why further testing wasn't done on algae obtained from the swamp. Is that it? Or the elephant park? From the park.
Yes, Your Honor.
Which exhibit is this, Ms. Claypoole, so that I can look at it as well?
Yes, Your Honor. It's Exhibit 5. Ms. Torres, could you pull up the unannotated copy? My apologies, Your Honor.
Ms. Aikens, you can help us as well.
Yes, Your Honor. I'll pull the exhibit up as well. Your Honor, I do have the section up where it states that no further testing was conducted. If you want that screen shared, I can do that right now.
You can just reference it to me. I'm looking at it. Where is it?
Sure, it's on the third page, and it looks like the third paragraph down. These materials can remain on surfaces for months. It's in that line.
Yes, Your Honor. If you're currently referencing it, what I was talking about in regards to why they didn't test further. So when he talks about the Redfield ratio, he talks about how it's a highly unusual and unique combination of the specific contents of the algae, which indicates that it's specific to the Big Gum Swamp and would it be present in a secondary location.
May I respond, Your Honor?
One last time.
While the document does say that these two types of algae are rare, it doesn't make that conclusion that that's why they didn't test the algae at the elephant park. Now, for Agent Branham to make that leap is an improper opinion.
Your Honor,
I tend to agree. Sustained.
Motion to strike the testimony.
That portion is stricken.
so Investigator Branham, you were in contact with Miss Lee, or you saw Mr. Don Clark's phone records on the day of his disappearance, correct?
I did.
And he did text Lisa Clark that day?
He did. There was a text to Lisa Clark. Correct.
And where was Miss Clark's text sent from?
This text was sent from his own home.
And where was Miss Lisa Clark's text sent from?
I believe Miss Lisa Clark's text was sent from outside of his home.
Yes. Did she live in the same city as Mr. Clark?
I believe so.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Recross.
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Agent Branham, for your testimony. You may step down. Anything further from the government?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the people rest.
Okay, the government having rested, defense may call its first witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Joe Young to the stand.
Joe Young, consider yourself sworn. You may proceed when ready, Ms. Aikens.
Good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Young, but you can call me Joe.
What do you do for a living?
I am currently a filmmaker producer. I do reality television and documentaries.
When did you first meet Kara Bassett?
I first met Kara Bassett in 2015, and she contacted me about producing a documentary entitled The Elephant Queen.
Did you work at her elephant park?
Yes, I did. I was there 5 days a week from 2015 to 2017. It was about 3 years. I was there 5 days a week, 10 hours a day.
And how much footage did you gather from all of your time working at the park?
I have about 2,000 hours of footage that I've gathered and recorded since I was at the park.
You just said that you have 2,000 hours worth of video footage. Is it fair to say that you got to know Don and Kara pretty well during that time?
Oh, most definitely. I was practically best friends with Don Clark, and me and Kara were close as well. Don loved his business side of things, but he also loved Costa Rica.
Now, in addition to the times when you were filming, how much time do you think you spent at the park, for filming and not filming?
I think about 4,000 hours is a good estimate about how much time I spent on the park the last 3 years.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Don and Kara's relationship. From what you saw, what was the relationship like?
It was like every relationship in the world. They loved each other. They, of course, had a few fights, but they called each other soulmates, and Kara even called Don her gentle giant.
Did those fights ever get out of control at all?
I wouldn't say out of control, but there was this one time that Kara got really passionate and she threw a vase at Don, but it of course missed. But right after, 15 minutes after, they were back to normal, and Kara, until then, has been perfectly fine with Don. She loves Don.
I'd like to talk to you about the events of August 18th, 2017. Were you at the park on that day?
Yes, it was like any other day. I showed up at 8 a.m. and I left at 6 p.m.
Who did you spend most of your day with?
I spent most of my day with Kara. When I got to the park, she was already in her work boots, she was already in her work attire, and she went straight out to the elephants. So I grabbed my camera and I started recording the elephants.
You said that you know Kara pretty well. Did she seem different at all on the day of the disappearance?
No, she seemed perfectly fine. It was like any other day for Kara. It was going to work for the elephants and going to educate the public about orphaned and abused elephants and how to take care of them.
Did you have any interactions with Don on the date of the disappearance?
I did have an interaction with Don. It was around 6 p.m. before I was about to leave. I was telling him about my midnight flight, which was going to be awful, and he got a text message and he looked down at his phone and he was terrified.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
As to,
Mr. Young claiming that Don was in fact terrifying, seeing as he is not Don Clark himself, he cannot attest to the mindset.
Ms. Aikens.
Yes, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 701, a witness is allowed to testify to something in his or her rationally based perception. Now, this witness testified that he spent nearly 4,000 hours at the park with Don and Kara Bassett. Because he spent all that time with the two parties in today's case, he would be able to read their emotions and determine, based on his rationally based perception, that Don was scared.
I'm
Your
going to
Honor.
sustain the objection, but allow you to lay foundation, Ms. Aikens.
Motion to strike, Your Honor.
Stricken.
Mr. Young, did Don look any particular way when he looked down at his phone?
I mean, from what I saw, his face went white. And to me, it looked like he was scared.
Did Don say anything?
Yep, got out of the car, slammed the door, and said he needed to take it. Whatever was on his phone was the most important thing at that time.
Hearsay, Your Honor.
I believe you cut out for a minute. Can you repeat
Yeah.
that?
There was a crosstalk. I didn't get what was being said. What's the specific statement you're objecting to, Ms. Claypoole?
Yes, I believe it was the statement of Mr. Don Clark, where he got out of the car and said he needed to deal with the call.
Okay. And you have a hearsay objection lodged against that.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Aikens.
Yes, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 8033, this is a statement of intent. Don Clark said, "I need to deal with this." That's directly an intent of what he wanted to do, and that's what he did after that.
I think you're right. Overruled.
Mr. Young, did Don say anything after he looked down at his phone?
I mean, he looked at me and he told me he needed to take this, and he was scared, so I let him do it.
Did you ever see Don again after he got that call?
No, I never saw him again. I took off on my flight, and when I returned, he was gone.
I'd like to talk about a possible explanation for why you never saw Don again. Now, you mentioned that you filmed employees and Kara Bassett at the park. Is Exhibit 45 a video that you filmed and retained in the course of your business there?
Let me review it in the electronic profile. Yes, it is something I filmed. It was of Kelsey Stebbins, a park employee. I filmed it in February of 2018.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense offers Exhibit 45 into evidence.
Ms. Claypoole, 45 has been offered.
Yes, Your Honor, I have an objection to hearsay.
Ms. Aikens.
Yes, Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 8036, this is an example of regularly conducted business activity. Now, we've laid the foundation that Joe Young was an employee of the park, that he was doing his job when he was filming this recording. And additionally, in this video is another employee of the park. All of the events within this video do relate to regularly conducted business activity.
All right, let's do this because it's hard for me to rule just without seeing what's going on here. The jury is constructively out of the courtroom. Show the video so I can rule on it, please.
One day, Don came up to me and shook his head. He said, "Have you ever thought about just leaving it all behind? No goodbyes, no see you laters, just up and leaving in the middle of the night?"
What's the exception you're offering this under, Ms. Aikens? Can't hear you.
My apologies, Your Honor. This comes in under 8036, regularly conducted business activity.
This video.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Mr. Young, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the FBI. You said you have 2,000 hours of video footage. Did the FBI ever look at that footage?
No, they never asked for that footage, nor did they look at that footage. And I was talking to some of the staff at the park, and I was never interviewed, and Nate Garson was never interviewed, and neither was Kelsey Stebbins.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay again.
Okay, who's the declarant here?
Ms. Garson, Ms. Stebbins, and yes, Ms. Garson and Ms. Stebbins.
Okay. So we have two declarants in this one bit here.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Aikens.
Yes, Your Honor. We're willing to strike those two statements from the record that Nate Garson and Kelsey Stebbins were never interviewed, and just keep the testimony that Mr. Young was never interviewed by the FBI, or that the FBI never saw the 2,000 hours of video footage.
Okay, perfect. Is that all right, Ms. Claypoole, or did you want more?
Yes, I did not realize there was a third declarant in this, so I would also object to hearsay for the third declarant.
Okay, I'm going to guess that Ms. Aikens is okay with striking that as well.
Your Honor,
Yes, Ms. Aikens?
I don't believe there is a third declarant. The only statement that I'm asking this witness to say is that the FBI never reviewed the 2,000 hours of video footage, and that the FBI never interviewed this witness.
Who's the declarant of that particular statement? Or there's no declarant?
There's no declarant, Your Honor.
My
Okay,
apologies.
then-
I thought that Ms. Aikens cited a third name.
Okay, the objection then is withdrawn. The statements are stricken. Proceed.
Mr. Young, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about that investigation. The government alleges that there's some algae and mud on Kara Bassett's boots. Do you know if the park had any mud on it?
Yes, so sometimes it rained on the park and there was mud, obviously, and there was also lakes on the park, and Kara Bassett was always in her boots, in the lakes, in the grass, everywhere.
The government alleges that there's some algae and mud on a wheelchair. Was that chair ever wheeled around the park?
Well, yes, per federal guidelines and federal law, the park was required to have a wheelchair for all disabled individuals, and yes, sometimes it rained and the wheelchair was out in the park.
Finally, I want to ask you about Lisa Clark. What was the relationship between Dawn and Lisa like?
Just from my experiences, I saw that Lisa and Dawn's relationship wasn't good.
Did Lisa ever threaten Dawn?
Objection, Your Honor. Question calls for hearsay.
Ms. Aikens.
Yes, Your Honor. These statements come in under 8033, specifically the one statement. If I may make an offer of proof, Your Honor.
Please.
The one statement is, I'll wipe you off the face of the earth. That is clearly showing intent that Lisa Clark is intending to wipe him off the face of the earth. And Your Honor, the other statement is that he will be sorry. Your Honor, that is not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, that Dawn Clark actually will be sorry, but rather for Lisa Clark's state of mind.
I tend to think neither are offered for the truth. So it's going to be overruled.
Mr. Young, did Lisa ever threaten Dawn Clark?
Yes, it was one day at the park and Lisa came onto the park and started yelling at Dawn Clark. She was yelling that I'll wipe you off the face of the earth and you'll be sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Young. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any redirect? I'm sorry, recross.
Oh, yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
All right. Now, Mr. Young, I understand that you were hired by Ms. Bassett to film a documentary about her elephants. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And to produce this documentary, you were at the park 5 days a week, every week, for many years. Is that right?
Yes, 10 hours a day as well.
And in this time that you spent at the park, you saw the Clarks in their ups and their downs.
Yes, that is correct, just like every relationship.
And when they did tend to argue, it was usually about elephants. Isn't that right?
Yes, it was about the business versus the sanctuary aspect.
Yeah, more specifically, how the park was run.
Yes, correct.
And Ms. Bassett wanted to make it more of a sanctuary. Is that correct?
Yes, from my understanding of Miss Bassett's goal, that was it.
All right, and they frequently fought about this disagreement. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you never caught any of these fights on camera.
I did catch some of them on camera, yes, but Kara had me delete the footage and she didn't want that in the documentary. She didn't want her personal life in the documentary.
All right, now I understand that, my apologies. You filmed lots of clips about the park, is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And these were clips unrelated to Miss Bassett's disappearance, or Mr. Clark's disappearance.
I mean, I had footage from the day Don Clark was at the park, the day of his disappearance. I don't know whether they were relevant or not to the investigation.
All right, now I understand that you captured some of Miss Bassett's visions for the park on video, is that right?
Yes, we sat down and those were in the documentary.
And you would recognize a copy of that video if I were to show it to you in court today?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, at this time, I would request that my opposing counsel and the witness refer to exhibit number 36 within their virtual trial binders, as the prosecution would like to move into evidence.
Okay, so 36 is a video.
Yes, sir.
And you're playing it or you're not going to play it?
If we are to play, we would like to play constructively outside of the jury.
I haven't heard an objection yet, so it seems to me that you're free to play it for the jury.
Objections.
There is an objection now. Okay.
No, there are no objections.
No objections. Okay. No objections. Then go ahead, You can play it if you want.
Oh, I'm steaming. This is a business, not a charity. As long as it's my money, we'll run it that way. That's what Don said to me. Can you believe that? We'll see how this ends.
As long as it's my money, we'll run it my way. Did you hear that correctly, Mr. Young?
I think I missed the first part of your question, Miss Claypoole.
My apologies. I said, as long as it's my money, we'll run it my way. Did you hear that correctly?
Yes.
And do you know who Ms. Bassett was referring to with this statement?
I believe I heard Don Clark say that statement multiple times.
And to your knowledge, did Mr. Clark do anything to turn the park into a sanctuary?
I don't think there was any steps towards that direction. I mean, Don was all about business.
Right, and they did get in a big fight about the business versus the sanctuary in July or August of 2017. Is that correct?
I wouldn't call it a big fight, but there was a fight. Yes, ma'am.
Right, and this fight entailed Ms. Bassett being so angry that she threw a vase at Mr. Clark's head.
Yes, that is correct.
And just to clarify, the defendant did make you delete this footage.
Yes, she did. She didn't want her personal life and personal troubles out in the public.
All right, now moving on to more of Don's personal affairs, I understand that you were aware of his involvement in Costa Rica.
Yes, he used to talk to me all the time about Costa Rica, and he loved the place.
He loved it so much that he traveled every couple of months, isn't that right?
Yes, that was correct. He owned a plane and he traveled in that plane.
And the defendant was usually aware of these trips, right?
100%. He always communicated with his wife.
However, the defendant did at times complain about these trips, isn't that true?
Oh, for sure. She loved Dawn. She wanted them with her. So she was like, why are you abandoning me? I would want to come too. That's what she said multiple times.
Just to clarify, that was a yes to my question that she did complain about these trips.
Yes, it was, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Young. And now, regarding the day of Dawn's disappearance, you overheard a phone call between Kara and Dawn, is that right?
Yes, I did. I didn't hear the whole phone call. I heard a small bit of it.
And this small bit detailed, sweetheart, I don't mind you going out without me, is that right?
Yes, that is what I heard Kara Bassett say.
And she was telling that to Dawn?
I would assume Dawn was on the other end of the phone. Yes.
And this was a break from Ms. Bassett's usual attitude about Dawn leaving her, isn't that right?
Yes, but the relationship was better than it was.
All right, now, Mr. Young, I'd like to draw your attention to exhibit number 18. Ms. Torres, could you throw that on the screen? All right, so Mr. Young, this is an elephant tranquilizer, is that right?
Yes, those, I saw them around the park and they used them to help the elephants when they were hurting.
They use them to help the elephants, but you are aware that these are lethal to humans, right?
Yes, I am.
And Ms. Bassett had access to these tranquilizers?
Yes, Ms. Bassett, about the staff and the doctors at the park as well had access.
Right, but that was a yes to my question, that Ms. Bassett did have access, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and now I understand that you talked to some park employees about the tranquilizers as well.
Yes, I did.
You talked to Ms. Stebbins, isn't that true?
Yes, I did. I took an interview with Ms. Stebbins.
And that interview is exhibit number, interview is in an exhibit in court today, is that correct?
Yes, it's exhibits 45 through 48.
Right, and you would recognize that if we were to show it to you in court today?
Yes, ma'am, I would recognize all four.
All right, at this time, the defense moves to enter exhibit number 46 into evidence.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Okay, 46 has been offered. We have a hearsay objection. Can we sort this out without having to hear it, or do I need to hear it to resolve this?
Yes, Your Honor, I think we will be able to. May I respond?
Okay, please.
Yes, Your Honor, this is an admission by a party opponent, seeing as Ms. Stebbins was an employee of Ms. Bassett, and Ms. Bassett is on trial today.
May I respond?
So the declarant is going to testify or is going to say something that the defendant told her.
Yes, or no, Your Honor. However, this statement is made by an employee of the party that is on trial today, and therefore a party opponent statement.
Okay, Ms. Aikens.
Yes, Your Honor. Attorney Claypoole is referencing Rule 801 D2D, a statement made by an agent or employee of a party opponent. However, Kara Bassett was not the person who employed Kelsey Stebbins. Don Clark was. Don Clark was the one who owned the Elephant Park. And because of that, he was the one who paid the salaries of all the employees. He was the one who hired all the employees. So Kelsey Stebbins is not the employee of Kara Bassett.
Response, Your Honor?
Well, what's the declarant going to say?
When she counted the syringes, and just to clarify, this video was taken after Don Clark was presumed dead, and therefore when Kara was the owner of the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park. So therefore, Ms. Stebbins would have been her employee.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
Yes.
The standard outlined in Rule 801 D2D is that the topic in whichever statement, the topic in the video has to be about something pertaining to that employment when the time that employment was active. At this time, Kelsey Stebbins will be talking about her count of the syringes on the date of Don Clark's disappearance. And during that time, Don Clark was still her employer. Kara Bassett didn't become her employer until October of 2017, Your Honor.
Okay, the declarant is referring to something that happened prior to the relationship that exists at the time? Is that what you're saying? Okay,
Yes.
one last bite, Ms. Claypoole.
Yes, Your Honor, this was made within the scope of their relationship while it existed, seeing as Don and Kara were both owners of the park, and this just so happened to be on the day of Don's disappearance in which the transaction would have been moved over. In addition, the counting of the syringes was a normal business activity for Ms. Stebbins and within the scope of her relationship to both her employment to Don and Kara.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with that. The objection is overruled. The video is received.
Ms. Torres, can you play that video for the court?
I do a count of the tranquilizers every Friday, and August 18th was no different. When I left at 6 p.m., they were all there. 24 syringes.
24 syringes at 6 p.m., Mr. Young. Did you hear that correctly?
Yes, I did. That was part of the interview I took of Miss Stebbins on February 1st of 2018.
And when did you leave the park that day?
I left the park shortly after my conversation with Dawn, around 6 p.m., I think.
And do you know when employees normally left the park? Wasn't it around 8 p.m.?
I believe employees left around, just like me since I was an employee, around 6 p.m.
All right, so around 6 p.m., all the employees had left the park. Is that correct?
I don't know if every employee left, but I know that I left and I was not there.
Of course. And now I want to talk about your reaction to Mr. Clark's disappearance. So you first found out that he was missing a week after he disappeared. Is that correct?
Yes, I got back from my flight from Mexico and I landed on the property to do filming, and yes.
And while you were in Mexico, Ms. Bassett never reached out to you?
I don't believe so, no.
She never told you that her husband was missing?
Not that I'm aware of, no. I never got a text or a phone call.
Now I understand that during your 64 minutes interview, you were shown Ms. Bassett's phone records. Is that right?
Yes, it was just a glimpse.
And within this glimpse, you did become aware that Ms. Bassett didn't call or text anyone for a week after her husband's disappearance. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay, is there any redirect? And for housekeeping purposes, I said recross, I meant cross. I got wrapped around the axle. So is there any redirect, Ms. Aikens? Okay, I read your lips to say there's no redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. My apologies for the audio issue.
That's okay. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Young. You may step down. Anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the defense rests.
Okay, the defense having rested, everyone should switch their view to speaker view. And I'm ready for closing arguments. We'll begin with the government.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, you may.
Don Clark was but a pawn in Queen Kara's game of chess. May it please the court. Today, you've heard the story of Don Clark, a man who fell victim to the defendant's vicious plan for power. And from both the people and the defense, you heard some long and convoluted stories. So members of the jury, let's walk through Ms. Bassett's plan. The trouble began months before Dawn disappeared. This is a business, not a charity. As long as it's my money, we'll run it my way. These are the words of Don Clark, who established a paradigm of money equals power. So what did Ms. Bassett do next? She made it her money. On May 1st of 2017, Ms. Bassett decided she had the sole right to control all of Don's assets in case he disappeared. This was a clause no lawyer or investigator had ever heard of before, but nonetheless, Ms. Bassett insisted on its inclusion. At this point, the only thing standing between the defendant and control of the park was Don Clark's life. And in Ms. Bassett's own words, she would get in your face, take you to your grave, anything to protect the elephants. Adding to the defendant's frustration, through the letter of Mandy to Minnelli, we learned that a restraining order was filed against Ms. Bassett. This restraining order was on behalf of Don Clark. And if Ms. Bassett did find out about this restraining order, she would have known her time was running out. So she played the game wisely. By creating the facade of a loving wife, she hid the monster within. At 2:33 p.m. on the day of Don's disappearance, she lovingly endorsed his trip to Costa Rica. At this point, it would make it look as if Don merely skipped town, as Ms. Clark wasn't standing in his way. Then, at 6 p.m., we learned park employee Kelsey Stebbins counted exactly 24 syringes of carfentanil, which shows us that a syringe had to have gone missing that night. And at 8 p.m., the park grew silent, and the chessboard showed a clear, unobstructed path for Ms. Bassett to thrust a tranquilizer 5,000 times more toxic than heroin into her husband, murdering him in cold blood. Check. Now, members of the jury, this is where the cover-up begins. At 11:14 p.m., Ms. Bassett used Dawn's phone to text herself going out for a while, a ploy that would make it look as if she was simply asleep in bed that night. And then, with Dawn's lifeless body carelessly thrown in the back, she drove 132 miles to the Big Gum Swamp, where she disposed of his body when she arrived at 2:26 a.m. Then, Your Honor, with the defendant's newfound freedom closer than ever, she sped to the Cary Bel-Air Airport, where she staged Dawn's vehicle, leaving the doors unlocked, and biked the short commute home. She arrived by sunrise, called checkmate, secured the elephant park, and won the game. Members of the jury, the people have met their burden of proof today. We have shown you beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Bassett caused the death of her husband and did so with malice, but let's walk through these prongs. First, we know that Ms. Bassett murdered her husband due to two factors: missing carfentanil and algae samples. First, on the night of Dawn's disappearance, exactly one syringe of carfentanil went missing at 6 p.m. after all the employees went home and Ms. Bassett was the only one left. This shows us that a syringe had to have been stolen that night and had to have been used by Ms. Bassett as it is now unaccounted for. And regarding the algae samples, we found these on the wheelchair, on Ms. Bassett's boots, and on the van itself. This places Ms. Bassett's feet on the ground at the Big Gum Swamp as she disposed of Dawn's body, and her feet on the gas as she sped to the airport. She was at the scene of the crime. And, Your Honor, regarding malice, we know that Ms. Bassett planned this thoroughly and intentionally due to just how much she stood to gain. She orchestrated this crime for months, starting with a disappearance clause that entitled her to a house, cars, planes, $6 million, and most importantly, the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park. The payout almost speaks for itself. Members of the jury, to Kara Bassett, the life of Don Clark was expendable. He was a mere bump in the road towards everything she desired. Nothing and nobody was going to stand in her way, so she murdered him. Members of the jury, we urge you to rule in the favor of the prosecution today and convict Ms. Bassett of murder. Because remember, Don Clark was but a pawn in Queen Kara's game of chess. Thank you. I'd like to reserve any remaining time for a possible rebuttal, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Claypoole. Ms. Aikens.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I proceed with closing, Your Honor, can you hear me okay from back here? I know I had some audio troubles previously in this round.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. It does cut in and out. It's not the best audio, but, I guess that's just a decision you'll have to make.
Okay, Your Honor. Thank you for letting me know. I'm absolutely happy with that. Wild assumptions led to wild accusations. Today, we learned the government's entire case was built on assumptions. They assumed that Don Clark is dead. They assumed the evidence implicates Kara Bassett, and they assumed that suspects other than Kara didn't need to be considered. Members of the jury, if you have to fill in the gaps in the government's case by making assumptions, if you have to speculate to connect the dots, that's reasonable doubt. That means that the government has not met their burden of proving that Kara Bassett intentionally killed her husband, Don Clark. And you must find a verdict of not guilty. Now, we're going to go through those assumptions one by one. First, the government assumed that Don Clark is dead, but members of the jury, you heard that the FBI hasn't been able to find his body in the 3 years since his disappearance. Why not? Because it's possible that he ran away. Let's just think about all of the pressures that were piling up. He was being sued for $2 million. He was being threatened by his ex-wife. He was fighting with his current wife, and he was having business trouble with the Costa Rican mafia. Members of the jury, you saw the text that Don got on the night of the disappearance. Someone from Costa Rica told him to call them immediately. Next activity on Don's cell phone was a text to his wife that he was going out for a while. Then he turned off his phone signal, and he didn't come back. Members of the jury, you heard Don Clark had the means to run away. He was storing off the books cash, hidden assets. Not only that, but he had a twin-engine Cessna and a license to fly. You heard that Agent Branham just assumed that that plane in the hangar was Don's. But you heard today that that plane only had one engine. But if the FBI had done their jobs, they would have seen that Don Clark had a 2-engine plane. Where is that plane? Why couldn't the FBI find it? Because it's wherever Don Clark is hiding right now. Second, the government assumed the evidence implicates Kara Bassett. Attorney Claypoole told you about a syringe of carfentanil that went missing from the park's property. Members of the jury, you never heard any forensic evidence indicating that Mr. Clark had carfentanil in his system. You never heard anything that can tie Kara Bassett to this murder directly with that syringe. Government asked you to make similar assumptions about the algae. Agent Branham tried to tell you that the algae on Kara Bassett's boots was a match to the Big Gum Swamp. But members of the jury, you learned that we can't be sure when or how that algae was deposited. And if the FBI can't be certain, If Agent Branham doubts his own office's conclusions, how can you be certain enough to find Kara Bassett guilty? Third, the government assumed that suspects other than Kara didn't need to be investigated. Even if the government's assumption about Don Clark being dead is correct, it's very possible that his ex-wife, Lisa Clark, killed him. We learned that she threatened Don time and time again. She said that she would wipe him off the face of the earth, that she would make him sorry. Members of the jury, her only statement to the FBI was that she hoped her ex-husband was dead, that he deserved to die. Other than that, she refused to cooperate with their investigation. The FBI knew about these threats. They knew that Lisa Clark was a potential suspect. What the FBI didn't know, what the FBI still doesn't know, is where Lisa Clark was on the night of the disappearance. And they don't know because they never bothered to look. Now, Attorney Claypoole just told you that Kara Bassett used Don Clark as a pawn. But members of the jury, think about the other story you heard today. The story where Kara Bassett gets up one morning and finds that her husband is nowhere to be found, that he left in the middle of the night. She's scared. She doesn't know where he went. So she goes to the police. She calls the police and says, "I can't find my husband." The next thing she knows is she's being charged with his murder. Members of the jury, the government wants you to assume that Kara Bassett committed this crime even though they have no murder weapon, no body, no eyewitnesses, and no evidence. Don't decide your verdict in the same way that the government decided who they would target as a suspect. Find Kara Bassett not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aikens. Ms. Claypoole, you reserve time for rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor. To my understanding, I have about 1 minute and 30 seconds remaining. Is that disputed by Ms. Aikens, timekeeper?
I don't believe so.
All right. All right, Your Honor, may I begin?
You may.
Ms. Aikens is right that in this case, there are assumptions and there are accusations. But in no way have these qualified as wild. And members of the jury, let's talk about why. She based her case on 3 factors: no body, how the evidence implicates Kara, and how there were other suspects that weren't investigated. But members of the jury, not only is there no body, but there's no evidence that Don Clark is even still alive. No one was able to find evidence of him living or hiding out anywhere. In addition, he was legally declared dead by the state of Florida. And now regarding Ms. Bassett and how the evidence wrongly implicates her, forensic evidence was found on Ms. Bassett's boots and nobody else's boots. This evidence places Ms. Bassett and only Ms. Bassett at the park. And regarding the other suspects, the opposing counsel talked about how Ms. Lisa Clark was improperly investigated. But members of the jury, Ms. Clark lived in Orlando, 4 hours away from Dawn's residence. Are we supposed to believe that she made that trek in an unreasonable amount of time? Members of the jury, please remember that Ms. Bassett was the only one with motive and means to do this. Motive and means to use Don Clark as a pawn in her game of chess. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Claypoole. What I would ask now is that the jury complete their ballots, and we'll wait to get the go-ahead on comments.